welcome, my friend. It is hump day. Yes, it is Wednesday. And once again, we are halfway through our week. And on Monday, Morning Cup of Joe, my actual main theme was in between stimulus and response. And stimulus most often is emotional. And that's what makes it so challenging to be able to control our emotions. Many of us will say things that we later regret. So we have to kind of try to find that space between stimulus and response to decide and choose how we want to respond. And you know what? Number one tip, you don't have to respond immediately. You may be able to say things like, let me think about this. I'm not sure how I feel about this. Let me get back to you. Or let's talk later. And it gives you time to collect your thoughts. Now, I learned this whole idea of stimulus and response when I read a book by an Austrian psychiatrist named Viktor Frankl. He wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, and he survived years in death camps of Nazi Germany. It sounds like an ominous piece of work, but it's not. It's a real thin book that I read during a plane flight. And it really made me think. In a sense, I've probably read it 2 or 3 more times. But what he's trying to say is that we may not have control over the outside world, but we do have control over how we respond or react to the outside world. So when we get into a heated discussion and you have some very strong emotions, once again, those emotions are really what drives us sometimes, especially in situations where there is conflict or the emotion of anger, or you get upset, whatever it might be. To say, time out, give me a break. I need to think about this. Let's talk about it later. So you can allow yourself to move past that emotion, give yourself time to really think about the situation and how you would want to respond to it. Now, when we get super into that emotion, sometimes we jump over that space where we have that time to reflect and respond. And what do? React. We react. That limbic brain is the area of our head that carries emotion, and it signals down to the lizard brain, fight or flight, boom, and I'm reacting. And oftentimes those reactions don't serve us, nor do they serve in the relationships that we have with people around us. And boy, there were times I wish I had learned this from Viktor Frankl, years before. But the important thing is that it did find its way into my ether, and I very much connected to it. Because when you think about the world that he had to live in a death camp in Nazi Germany, how intense that must have been, that you didn't know whether you were going to live to see the end of that day. Well, I'm telling you, those kinds of pressure in that kind of environment is far from what you and I live through on a day-to-day basis. I hope, right? I know things are tough on the job. I know things can be very tough in life with the economy the way it is, with our society in the way that it is. But it's not going to be solved by people reacting to that outside stimulus. Our problems are going to be solved by making a conscious choice to reflect and think about how we want to be, and to go beyond that and say, how would I like the world to be? How do I wish my community to be? And how can I behave in a way that is in concert with that vision that you have? Same is true as if you're running a business. There's a lot of stress on us these days with marketing and competition and challenges with sometimes people just showing up for work or doing a quality work. We could react and yell at them and threaten them, but I think a better approach is if we really think about how we would feel if we were in that person's shoes, if we were that person, and how would we want others to treat us? How would we want our leader to treat us? You can feel justified in going off on an employee that you think is lazy or they're not thinking, they're making mistakes. But does that fix things? It may make you feel better to get that off your chest. But then again, the closet down the hall where you can close the door and scream at the top of your lungs doesn't hurt either. But to go and say, how's it going? Is everything okay? Hey, look, I want to talk to you about the situation. I've kind of noticed that your work is not quite up to par, and I just want to talk about it just to see where you're at, and maybe together we can come up with some ideas on how we can see improvement. That's far better, isn't it? Look, people will manage themselves up or they'll manage themselves out within an organization. They'll decide that they weren't cut out for the work and they'll go. I have a story about an employee named Jesse that I used to work for me. He was a really nice guy. Everybody liked him. Jesse was a good person, but for whatever reason, he just couldn't do the job. We moved him around to different areas and he continued to make mistakes and everybody knew it. But what was the hardest part is that Jesse knew it. It had to have been a blow to his self-esteem that he wasn't able to perform in the environment with everybody else. And I sat down with Jesse as a part of a sit down talk and a documentation or a write up on, hey, I've got to document this. And if things don't improve, we've got to figure something out, which often means what? Letting them go, right? But I liked Jesse so much, and everybody else did. Even his supervisor who brought him up to me said, look, I really like the guy. He tries. You can tell he's putting effort into things, but he's just not catching on. I don't know what to do, Dave. Can you help me? So I said, yeah, let me talk to him. I said, hey, Jesse, you got a few minutes? Let's go in my office. And we sat down side by side. I don't like sitting opposite employees because it creates this us and them dynamic. And I wanted him to feel comfortable about the conversation so he could open up and tell me what's really going on. After several minutes of conversation with Jesse, it just seemed that it wasn't catching in his brain his job. He was trying, he wanted to do well, he wanted to fit in with everybody else. But at the end of the day, he couldn't. So I asked Jesse, what do you love to do? What do you enjoy? And he kind of grinned. He goes, I like to fish. Okay. Well, go back and do the best you can. And we'll talk about this in a couple weeks. As it happened, one of the other coworkers' dad had a full day fishing boat that goes out and he needed some help. His dad was getting on in age and he needed some assistance on the boat, and his son was not really all that into fishing. So I said, hey, can I talk to your dad? And I talked to him. Nice guy. I said, I've got an employee who's a really great person. Um, would you be interested in us getting lunch and me introducing you to Jesse? I think he would be perfect to help you out on your boat." And sure enough, we sat down. We actually met um, right near the pier and had some lunch. And they were talking like they'd known each other their whole lives. I mean, you get two people who are into fishing, and there's no end. As it turned out, we were able to find Jesse a job to go directly into. He started the following week, and it made me feel good. You see, sometimes when we have to let somebody go, we may be holding them back from a dream job. All they need is a little help. And that space that Viktor Frankl talks about in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, gave me that opportunity to really reflect and have some conversations with people and stumble on one of my colleagues whose dad had a fishing boat and was retired but needed some help because he was getting on in his age. From that point forward, I worked with our human resources person, and anytime we have to let somebody go, what we do is we draft a resume for them. We sit down with them and ask them, what are your strengths? What areas would you like to get into? And then we do an active search to see if we can place them on the job. We do that for all employees because we have to. It's the law. We can't treat one employee differently than another. But the nice thing is my HR wizard, if you want to call her that, she said, the good thing about this is that when we do this, we don't pay any unemployment insurance because they go from our place of work to this new job position. So I'm wondering why Zoom froze up on me. But anyway, be that as it may, I want you to think about, because some of us are truly driven by our emotions. So we really need to find that space between stimulus and response and allow ourselves the time to think things through so that we can respond rather than react. And with that in mind, I hope you have a wonderful week. And I look so much forward to seeing you next Monday for our Monday Morning Cup of Joe. Have a great week and lead well, my friend.